take heed to yourselves, lest at any time your hearts be overcharged with surfeiting and drunkenness and cares of this life, and so that day come upon you unawares. For as a snare shall it come on all of them that dwell on the face of the whole earth. Watch ye therefore, and pray always, that ye may be counted worthy to escape all these things that shall come to pass, and to stand before the Son of Man. The book of Luke, chapter 21, verse 34 through 36. Shalom, brothers and sisters. As we watch and diligently observe the times, we must understand that truth will prevail. What we have to do is make sure that we examine the scriptures to see the signs of time and make sure the message is clear so that we can see the signs. The scripture says, Ephesians chapter 5 and verse 14, wherefore he saith, awake thou that sleepest, and arise from the dead, and Christ shall give thee light. See then that ye walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise, redeeming the times, because the days are evil. Wherefore, be ye not unwise, but understanding what the will of the Lord is. So we have to examine the scriptures in order to stay up to date. So as we examine the scriptures and we examine what's going on in front of us, we should be able to see the signs of the times and be able to see what's at hand. So let's examine the coronavirus in short. Its connection to China, Morocco, the U.S., our diet, and the looming pandemic that's on the horizon. If we know where the coronavirus originated, which is in China, specifically Wuhan. So as we look at it, we must examine the scripture and see what the scripture says in order to give us more insight. The book of 2nd Ezra, the 15th chapter, starting at the 5th verse. Behold, saith the Lord, I will bring plagues upon the world, the sword, famine, death, and destruction. For wickedness have exceedingly polluted the whole earth, and their hurtful works are fulfilled. Therefore saith the Lord, I will hold my tongue no more as touching their wickedness, which they profanely commit. Neither will I suffer them in those things in which they wickedly exercise themselves. Behold, the innocent and righteous blood crieth unto me, and the souls of the just complain continually. And therefore saith the Lord, I will surely avenge them, and receive unto me all the innocent blood from among them. And thou, Asia, thou art partakers of the hope of Babylon, and art the glory of her person. Woe be unto thee, thou wretch, because thou hast made thyself like unto her, and hast decked thy daughters in whoredom, that they might please and glory in thy lovers, which have always desired to commit whoredom with thee. Thou hast followed her, that is hated in all her works and inventions. Therefore saith God, I will send plagues upon thee, widowhood, poverty, famine, sword, and pestilence, to waste thy houses with destruction and death. And the glory of thy power shall be dried up as a flower, when the heat shall arise that is sent over thee. So later on, as we further get into the scriptures to examine and see what the prophecies say about Asia, we'll see why the Most High exactly wanted to judge them. But before we get to it, we'll take a look at some clips to see exactly what's going on with the coronavirus, things that they knew and didn't share with us. China knew it could be spread through food consumption, which is why they pulled certain fertilizer from the market. The fertilizer they used contained key ingredients which came from bats, which is called guano. Guano is one of the main sources, if not the main source, that allows us and other countries to be able to produce food at a massive scale. When you look back at history, you'll see that there was even wars fought over this particular substance. It's the main source that allows the countries and other countries that thrive, that seem to have a lack of resources, be able to produce, even though they might not have the natural resources to be able to produce at such a high level. The Wuhan lab in China continues to be the center of attention for many reasons, but we should pay attention to another issue that could be the leading cause of so many deaths worldwide. The question to be answered is bat feces or guano in fertilizer the sole culprit or the main culprit of the wildfire spread of coronavirus?
This is a farm in China. This is a McDonald's in New York. This is an apartment complex in Mumbai, and this is a skyscraper in London. What do all of these things have in common? Well, as it turns out, all of these places' successes or failures, economic booms or collapses, and even population explosions or famines might soon be decided by the nation of Morocco. But probably not for the reasons that you might think. In fact, this future economic trajectory was likely decided by a tiny little creature just a couple centuries ago. This is a bat. In the modern world, we view bats as things that both control insect populations, as well as creatures that spread rare diseases. But a few hundred years ago, bats were discovered to do something else. Something miraculous that would shape our world forever without most people realizing it. In 1802, the European explorer Alexander von Humboldt was traveling through the Peruvian lands when he discovered something strange. You see, the Peruvian lands did not seem like they were suitable for large-scale agriculture, yet the Peruvian fields were filled with lush and healthy-looking crops. And he soon discovered that the Peruvian people had been collecting a substance called guano, which is the excretion of bats and some seabirds, and they were using this by spreading it along their crops for the previous several thousand years. So, Alexander von Humboldt ended up bringing this knowledge of guano significantly increasing food production back to Europe, where soon that knowledge would become a key point of interest to the Western world. Because soon after the discovery of guano, food production boomed in the United States and Europe. And all of a sudden, these Western nations went from having a small but significant shortage of food to having a massive surplus of food, which was more than enough to feed all of its citizens and then some.
The SARS outbreak. She made a breakthrough in 2013. Xi Zhengli found bat feces with the virus 96.2% identical to the SARS-CoV-2.
Coming back to the question of accountability, there's a lot that China has to answer for. For starters, mysterious disappearances. Where are all these people going? China is systematically removing anyone who is asking questions. Xi Zhengli. She's called the Batwoman of China, and she has not been seen in public since the outbreak.
She is a renowned virologist. She is an expert on the coronavirus in bats. She is the supposed director of the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Xi Zhengli may have the answer to the question the world is asking. Her research was aimed at understanding the SARS outbreak. She made a breakthrough in 2013. Xi Zhengli found bat feces with the virus 96.2% identical to the SARS-CoV-2. Yes, this is the same virus that caused COVID-19. In 2015, she concluded that the SARS-like virus can jump from bats to humans.
Now, you see, guano became so important to the economic, population, and industrial growth of the Western world that it arguably became the most vital resource in the entire world. However, in 1913, Fritz Haber would discover a way to synthesize an artificial version of guano that we today call fertilizer. And it was this one event, the discovery of fertilizer, that would go on to be known as the detonator for the population explosion of the world. Soon after, starvation in nations that used fertilizer became rare. The world's population grew from 1.6 billion to 7.7 billion over the next 100 years. Food production and crop yields immediately doubled in many areas that used fertilizer. Nations with typically unsuitable locations to grow food, like northern European countries such as Norway, all of a sudden were able to sustainably grow crops in more areas. And well, eventually every single country's economic and population growth was indirectly caused by the food surplus created from fertilizer. But in 2010, a few scientists began to notice something a little bit worrying. Fertilizer, the compound responsible for a ton of the growth that humanity has seen over the last 2 centuries, might actually be running out. That's because that our fertilizer that has been used to grow our entire civilization over the last couple hundred years needs three things. One of which is a nitrogen-based compound, the second of which is a phosphate, and the third of which is a potassium-based compound. And two of these are compounds that we cannot create from scratch. And those compounds are phosphate and potassium, or in its raw form, potash. You see, potash is a non-renewable resource that is largely controlled by just 4 countries. Canada is by far the world's largest producer of potash, with over 1/3 of the world's potash coming from Canada. Russia, Belarus, and China produce between 10 and 20% of the world's potash each, and every other nation in the world combined produces only about 19% of the world's potash. And let's think about that for a second. Essentially, 4 countries control one ingredient that will dictate who is or isn't allowed to produce fertilizer. We are seeing countries take drastic economic policies to protect their own phosphate. For example, phosphate prices have increased by roughly 80% since early 2020. In September of 2021, China banned exporting of any of its own phosphate in hopes of assuring that it had enough phosphate to produce enough fertilizer to grow its own food for the foreseeable future. But there is one key aspect that I have left out until this point, and that is this. You see, China has the second largest phosphate reserves in the world, as it owns roughly 5% of the world's phosphate. And keep in mind that is second on this list, and it is already concerned about its phosphate supply. Syria has the 3rd largest amount of phosphate at 3%, Algeria is next at just under 3%, and the rest of the world has only 2% or less each per country in terms of the world's phosphate reserves. But then at number 1, there is the country of Morocco. You see, Morocco owns a whopping 70% of the world's phosphate. The world's food supply could become dependent upon whoever Morocco chooses to trade with or who they choose not to trade with. Or maybe just simply, Morocco will just sell off the phosphate to the highest bidder. There is also the potential for international conflict or cooperation, as that has been seen throughout history with any valuable resource. And this would be far from the first time that we have seen wars started or partnerships enacted that revolved around the acquisition of fertilizer.
We are getting word now that militaries across our world are preparing to go to war. They're preparing for the conflict that we all saw coming. When you have an economic crisis and a biological threat, history has told us time and time again since the recorded ages of the plagues that we would go to war.
Where China has warned its citizens, get ready. So I dug after the stream. I'm like, well, do I have enough food? I always do that. And I dug around on this. And sure enough, China is now warning its citizens. They're basically admitting this much. We don't have enough food and the grid's probably going to fail this winter. But now these same people that are doing this are telling people, go out and get what you can get. Crash, your local grocery stores, get what you can get, because we're going to run out. Vegetables in China. Over the past couple of days since the announcement, vegetables have went 150%. Like price-wise, they've inflated 150% against what they were just a few days ago.
Now, something really serious, meanwhile, is also happening in China. There is a run to the supermarkets. People are fighting for food. There is panic buying. Army biscuits and luncheon meats have become the most searched items online. Rice, soy sauce, chili sauce and noodles are trending on Alibaba. The top search on an engine reads, household stockpile list. Guess what's happening here? The Chinese are stocking up. They're buying cabbages, rice, sauce. Vendors are running out of stock. Begs the question, why? Why are people fighting for ration? Is China running out of food, or is there something worse in store? The government of Xi Jinping encouraged people to stock up. Vegetable prices are soaring in China. In many cases, they have become dearer than meat. Vegetables costing more than meat. Reports in Beijing, vegetable prices are up at least 50%. Why is that? Heavy rains have hit the agricultural province of Shandong. Crops have been ruined, supply chains have been disrupted, and now prices are soaring.
The U.S. military has strategic ambiguity. They have the ability to sit on the sidelines and then act with a moment's notice. But they will come to defend those allied pacts and agreements. Not doing so would leave the United States of America bare. Because let's face it, person for person, the U.S. versus China, the U.S. could never win. It would take superior firepower, and it would take, actually, an act of nuclear war.
So in our diligent observance of the prophecies and the times, we see that there is a connection between our food and coronavirus. There is a high probability or possibility that coronavirus has been transmitted from bats to humans through the use of guano, or more commonly known, fertilizer. So in conclusion, the prophetic scriptures about Asia's coming famine are being manifested right before our eyes. The book of 2 Ezra chapter 15, verse 49. I will send plagues upon thee, widowhood, poverty, famine, sword, and pestilence, to waste thy houses with destruction and death, and the glory of thy power shall be dried up as a flower, when the heat shall arise that is sent over thee. Thou shalt be weakened as a poor woman with stripes, and as one chastened with wounds, so that the mighty and lovers shall not be able to receive thee. Would I with jealousy have so proceeded against thee, saith the Lord, if thou hadst not always slain my chosen, exalted the stroke of thy hands, and saying over their dead, when thou wast drunken, set forth the beauty of thy countenance. The reward of thy whoredom shall be in thy bosom, therefore shalt thou receive recompense. Like as thou hast done unto my chosen, saith the Lord, even so shall God do unto thee, and shall deliver thee into mischief. Thy children shall die of hunger, and thou shalt fall through the sword. The city shall be broken down, and all thine shall perish with the sword in the field. They that be in the mountain shall die of hunger, and eat their own flesh, and drink their own blood, for very hungry of bread, and thirst of water. Thou as unhappy shalt come through the sea, and receive plagues again. And in the passage thou shalt rush on an idle city, and shall destroy some portion of thy land, and consume part of thy glory, and shall return to Babylon that was destroyed. And thou shalt be cast down by them as stubble, and they shall be unto thee as fire, and shall consume thee, and thy cities, thy land, and thy mountains, all thy woods, and thy fruitful trees, shall they burn up with fire. Thy children shall cry, they carry away captives, and look what thou hast. Thou shalt spoil it, and mar the beauty of thy face. And Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came to him for to show him the building of the temple. And Jesus said unto them, See you not all these things? Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. And as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, the disciples came unto him privately, saying, Tell us, when shall these things be? And what shall be the sign of thy coming, and of the end of the world? And Jesus answered and said unto them, Take heed that no man deceive you. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be